Hey, everybody. Yay. It's always lovely when your audio and video decide to work. Well, everyone, hello, and welcome to part 6 of our Meaningful Change series. My name is Casey Craig. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Stella's mom. She is a 5.5-year-old SCN8A warrior that's sweet, sassy, and fiercely strong, just like all of your kiddos. I'm so excited to be here today as the Cute Syndrome Foundation moderator as we gather together for our final Meaningful Change series event for 2021. Today, we are wrapping up the series with a community meeting with Praxis Precision Medicines. Our conversation today will be a relaxed discussion where our friends from Praxis will give us updates, and we will have time for you to ask them questions regarding their Prax 562 program. Before we get started, just a few reminders. Group interaction through questions and or comments will take place in the chat box. The chat box is to your right and allows you to directly type questions and or responses for any of our guests today. To your left, there's a tab titled Expo. In this area, you will find troubleshooting if you're experiencing technical issues, or you may also type a request in the for help in the chat box. Our technical guru, Megan Varner, will help you tackle any technical issues you might have today. As we wrap up the Meaningful Change series today, I wanted to personally extend a big thank you to all of the parents that were involved in different capacities over the past 6 weeks. Whether you were a guest speaker or a parent that habitually showed up, asked questions, and soaked up all the information, we thank you. As always, a huge thank you to our technical support team, Megan and Shelly, as we continued our virtual venture on Hopin. And none of this could happen without our generous sponsors. Thank you so very much to our lead sponsor, Praxis Precision Medicines and Neurocrine Biosciences. Finally, a ginormous thank you to our founder and director of the Cute Syndrome Foundation, Hilary Savoie, for organizing these events. I can only imagine the endless time and patience it takes to put together such a successful event series like the one she's pulled off. So without further ado, our fearless leader, Miss Hilary Savoie.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you believe it's the end? This is our last one.
I know. I don't know what I'm going to do with my Wednesdays from now on.
I know, huh?
It's like every Wednesday morning I wake up and I'm like, okay, I know exactly what I've got to do today. Casey, thank you so much for all of your help with this series and all of the other series. You really are such a joy to work with on this, and you make it so easy to get started and orient everyone. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure. It's been super fun to see everybody. So
yeah, and we'll do it again in the fall.
Sounds like a plan. See you then.
Okay. All right. Bye, Casey.
Bye.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So welcome to the last of our Meaningful Change series. This is an unsponsored event, sort of to draw this series to a close. And as you guys all remember, this series has been focused on the ways in which knowledge found within our SCN8A community can be leveraged to better support all of our children. We're such an active community, and I'm so proud of that. We have an amazing history of engaging deeply, meaningfully, and measurably among ourselves, as well as with the medical research and drug development communities. And we want to dig deeper into sharing the benefits of those experiences. So today is our second community meeting with Praxis Precision Medicines, marking the end of the series. As many of you may recall, we kicked off the series with a meeting with Praxis as well, and there was just such impressive engagement at this first meeting last month. I know you all are so eager to have your questions answered by the team at Praxis, so we've invited them back to interact more and have some more casual Q&A and dig into the detail on some of your questions from the last meeting and those that we've collected since. And as always, please, please, please ask your questions in the chat box live. We will do our best to answer any and all questions that come up. And with that, I'd like to invite our speakers on today, Marcio, Michael, Devra, and Kelly. Give you guys a minute to pop on. Hi, Marcio.
Hey, Hilary, how are you?
Oh, I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Doing great, living the dream.
Yeah, So happy to see you.
Happy to see you as well. And thanks for the invitation again.
Oh, of course. You guys are always welcome. Hi, Kelly.
Hello. How are you?
Well, thank you. How are you doing?
Good.
And here comes Michael. And Deborah. Amazing. Hi, Deborah.
Hi.
Hi there.
We'll give...
For some reason my video is not working at the moment, but I'll get it fixed. So
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. If you need any help, Michael, you can chat directly to Megan and she'll give you a hand. So welcome, guys. Thank you so much for coming again. I just want to say how, for the benefit of the families, how extraordinary these kinds of meetings are, and the fact that you guys are so consistently available to talk to us like this. Our families don't know any different because this is our community and this is how our community works. But it is really extraordinary, and I want to take a moment to thank you for your openness and willingness to chat with us in this way. So, and I guess what we'll do is just get started. If you guys could each do just a brief introduction, tell us who you are, and why you're, how you found yourselves working with the SCN8A community. And I guess we'll start with you, Marcio.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Hillary. And I think some of you might know me directly or indirectly through other meetings like this. I think it's third time's a charm, right? So it's the third this year that we are doing this together. Hillary, one with John and others, and two in this series. I'm the CEO and president for Praxis, basically part of the team here. That's how we roll. We believe that we're all in the same boat in terms of bringing drugs to patients. That's the only thing that really matters for all of us. Incredibly important, the work you all do and the questions you bring so we can reflect and we can do better. I think that's the spirits. I have been working in rare disease for, sometimes I say for longer than I want to admit, for about 17 years now, and met my wife, had kids with a rare condition as well after that. So I'm deeply engaged myself on this and on top of Praxis. So love the fact that we're able to connect and talk a little bit today. So
much, Marcio. And Deborah, could you introduce yourself and let us know how you landed working with the SCN8A community?
Happy to do so, and I'm so glad to be back. Thank you. So my name is Deborah Densmore, and I lead the patient advocacy team at Praxis for rare disease. I've been in rare diseases before in terms of advocacy, but this is really my first time working with the SCN8A community, and it has been absolutely wonderful. Seeing the level of engagement from families, seeing the leadership from advocates like Hillary, it's been just a wonderful experience to really listen and learn and get to know the community better so that we can hopefully do better in the work that we're doing. So this is a wonderful event, and I'm so excited to be back. So thank you, Hillary.
Thank you, Deborah. And oh, Michael, I'm so glad you're able to pop on just at perfect timing. I was just about to say, Michael, could you take a moment to introduce yourself and let us know how you landed working at Praxis and with the SCN8A community?
Sure. Thanks so much, Hillary, and thanks everyone on the call for joining today. My name is Michael Oldham. For those of you I haven't met, I am a pediatric neurologist and epileptologist by training. I practiced in clinical medicine, seeing primarily babies and infants with epilepsy for several years, and then transitioned to industry about 6 years ago, but I've only been at Praxis now for about 5 or 6 months. Epilepsy and working with families like all of you is an absolute passion and love of mine. I couldn't think of a better, job, if you will, and it's not even really a job. I love, every day what we do is just exhilarating. So happy to be a part of this conversation today and look forward to great discussions and listening and learning and hopefully providing some answers for all of you.
Thank you, Michael. And I think it's so important for our families to hear that and excitement for what you guys all do. And on that note, actually, we have Kelly Dalby who joined us today. And I'm really, really, really excited, Kelly, that you're here. I think it's so important for our families to meet you. understand the role that you play at Praxis. So families, we're gonna introduce you to Kelly a little bit and have her take some time to chat a bit about how she landed at Praxis. And I just want to sort of preface this by saying that, this series has been focused on looking at how knowledge arises from within a community. And Kelly's role is not something that we've talked about all that much, but is an incredibly important patient-focused story at the center of the rare disease program at Praxis. So Kelly, can you, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you landed at Praxis?
Sure. Thanks, Hillary. I'm happy to be here today. I've been at Praxis now for about 2 years. I work in clinical operations, and it started because I actually have a son, Connor. He's 11 years old, and he was diagnosed with an SCN8A mutation about 7 years ago. And at that time, very little was known about SCN8A mutations, and there was really no available treatment that I could find that helped him. And so decided to start a biotech company devoted to discovering treatments for SCN8A mutations with 2 other co-founders. And we had quite a bit of success in some preclinical work, and Praxis acquired the program. And now I've been working at Praxis for about 2 years. And at Praxis, I get to work on both the SCN8A and SCN2A programs.
I think this is just absolutely extraordinary that you have done this. And a lot of parents in this space who are incredibly driven and are looking for answers for their kids start foundations. That's what I did, not knowing what the heck I was doing. You took a bit of a different path, and I'm really curious for you to explain to our families a little bit about why you took that path.
Yeah, I think for me, I had a very laser focused goal. It was about how do we discover some sort of treatment the fastest possible way to ultimately help my son and all kids similar to him. And I didn't want to study this disease for, a decade. I wanted to what experiments needed to be done to figure out how we can treat this with some sort of medicine. And that's what I've been trying to do since we started this.
So can you tell us a little bit about your son and, what that looks like for him going forward?
Sure. So I guess when we started this about 6 years ago, it was a hypothesis in SCN8A was that if you had seizures in the first year of life, it was a gain of function. And if you had seizures later than that, it was a loss of function. So when we started, I was of the mentality that my son's mutation, he had seizures at 8 months old, was a gain of function. And so the program that we were working on, Praxis 222 and ASO, I believed that would help him. It ended up being that you can have loss of function mutations, you can have mixed property mutations in patients that present with seizures in the first year of life. So to make a very long story short, the programs that I currently work on at Praxis will not be of benefit to my son currently. There are other things that we're working on that should help his quality of life and help his symptoms. And so I work on all of those different programs right now.
Well, I think, Kelly, you and I have talked about this before, but for the benefit of our families, I feel that experience deeply also, having started a foundation intended to help my daughter and figuring out that it's a little bit more complicated than we thought, but also realizing that it's still so important to drive these things forward for all kids, even if they're not going to directly benefit our children.
Right. So, absolutely. Yeah. These kids, these families, we need better medicines that treat the disease, the comorbidities, and the seizures, all of it. And so it's my passion and drive. I want to help create that for all these kids, my son included. So it's very exciting work. I'm excited by it every single day.
Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your story. I think it's just really important for our families to hear and to also understand the overlap between the 2A and the 8A community and how our gains are with each other. They are separate disorders, but as it happens, 562 is hopefully going to help both of our communities. And I think we're on a path together, and it's important to acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, I think we've got some questions to hit from the families. We have questions that we collected since the last meeting, some that we touched upon in the last meeting and are going to go over again. And also families, as always, please ask away in the chat. I just want to remind you that this team may not be able to answer all of your questions maybe as thoroughly or as completely as you would like. Sometimes that's just because the information doesn't exist yet, or, you know, they can't necessarily share it because it isn't publicly available at the moment. So this is part of the nature of engaging with industry and why these interactions are far too rare often, and that we just want to be deeply appreciative and respectful of Praxis's willingness to share and engage in this way to the extent that they can. So starting out with some basics on 562, the last meeting you guys explained to the families that you were assessing safety in 562 in healthy adult volunteers, and that was a little confusing for some of our families. Just for background, this is the process, the normal process. You take a potential treatment for children and you first assess it in healthy adults. So Michael, if you could just talk to us a little bit about what has been found during that phase 1 portion of the trial, any drug interactions or side effects that might be important for our families to know about?
Sure, absolutely. First, I want to say too that I think the points that you just made and Kelly as well about the kind of commonalities between 2A and 8A and many of these different disorders we're working on is really crucial. I think that the complexities are real. It's this is every day we learn something new, and remaining humble, I think, is absolutely key. As Kelly mentioned, when Connor was first diagnosed, we thought that, well, okay, 1 year of age is the cutoff. Well, guess what? Science evolves, genetics is insanely complicated, and we learn new things all the time. So I think humility is something that we are faced with every day, and it I think is part of what drives us too. Because we at Praxis really want to help educate and be a part of this really amazing cutting edge science. So to get to your actual question, sorry. The phase 1 study. So as you said, phase 1 studies are often and typically done in healthy adults. They look at different things. So safety is certainly one of them. So any potential side effects when an individual takes 1 dose of the drug or multiple doses over several days. We look at things like blood levels of the drug itself, the compound. We look at other labs too, things like white blood cells and liver function and things like that. We have been very pleased so far with the safety and the different labs and heart function, et cetera, in the study so far. There have been 70 adults who have been dosed with the drug, either single doses or multiple doses over 14 days. These individuals in the study get, EKGs, so the measurement of the electrical activity of the heart. They get all different kinds of lab draws, like mentioned. Those have all been, within normal or nothing abnormal that was thought related to the drug itself. And in terms of different safety signals, so things that we call adverse events in studies, there have been a host of different adverse events that are, quite typical of things seen in a phase 1 study. So, things like, a little bit of headache or, upset stomach, things like that. None of these have been, clinically significant, meaning they didn't require any intensive treatment or anything for that matter. They all resolved on their own, lasted brief moments. And in terms of the what classically we think about in terms of side effects from sodium channel drugs, drugs like phenytoin or trileptal. When we think about those medicines, often we hear about dizziness. Some patients will describe, ringing in their ears, trouble with their vision. We, so far in the study, have had one patient who described some of those symptoms. They had some dizziness and what's called paresthesia. So like the tips of their fingers felt a little funny or numb. This lasted a matter of a couple of minutes and then resolved on its own. So we do think that that could be related. It's what we call an on-target event. So in a sense, that demonstrates to us that the medicine may be getting where it needs to be, if you will. And so that, again, was only in one patient, was mild, meaning it did not cause any discomfort or pain and was short-lived. So all of this so far really gives us a lot of comfort in terms of the safety. And the last thing I'll mention is that we actually have a goal to continue dosing in that study to try to look at additional dose levels so that we can go into studies in patients with what we hope to be the most efficacious dose. And by that, I mean, we don't want to start a study in patients at a dose that could be meaningless. That to us is a waste of your time, of your energies to participate in a study. We want to take a little bit of extra time to really find what we believe is a truly beneficial dose. And so that's kind of where we are at the moment.
Okay, so that sounds like all tremendously good news, right? That you're seeing very low rates of side effects, but you are seeing something that suggests that this is actually doing what we hope it's doing. So that's very exciting. Of course, I think every family member has probably the same main question, which is, how do we get our children enrolled in a clinical trial? When will that happen? Who will be eligible? What are the inclusion and exclusion criteria? And I know that's kind of a question across you, Michael and Marcio, so I'll let you guys kind of take it as you wish.
We'll tackle it together. The developments from now on, right, as Michael was saying, so maybe even I'll take one step backwards and then I can take some step forwards. We, in epilepsies in general, in GEs, like we have some good models, right? Like good models of 8A, good models of 2A, good models of generalized just epilepsies in general. And so we have a good idea on those animals what 562 is doing and what is the concentration in the brain that is necessary to reduce or extinguish seizures. When you use that concentration to predict the dose that we would be now in humans, we're well above the dose that we would be expecting. So that's the additional good news here, right, for this community that has some good models. And thanks for the work that all of you did to support that. So when you fast forward, we still want to get, as Michael said, the dose a little bit higher so we can test the limits there. But we're already in a good theoretical, because this is all theoretical until we get to patients, theoretical zone, right? So the next step here would be to be able to dose patients. Now, as we mentioned before, we have to first dose adults, and there are many reasons for that. One of the reasons is the toxicology package that supports the drug at the beginning is normally done in adult animals, therefore adult people come first, and then we finalize what's called juvenile tox, right? So the younger monkeys in this case, and that's what we are doing right now. And then we can dose based on the safety in adults and the safety on the younger animals. We can dose kids. So we expect to be able to do that the beginning of next year. That's the timeline we're operating right now. Obviously, notwithstanding the FDA being okay with that and so on. But we do expect that that's going to be fine. And that trial, the first one, is normally relatively small. And I know that that's not what all of us wants to hear, but it's normally relatively small. And it's normally, I would say, the most constrained of all of them, right? So it's where we are trying to learn. It's a slow process and so on. It's never fast enough for all of us trying to get to a resolution for these issues. But it's a great step that we fully expect to be in, is that even earlier than this time next year, but let's say this time next year would be like dosing patients. And that's where really meaningful work happens, right? So are we seeing what we are expecting? What are the adjustments we need to do? In rare disease, the most common development pathway is to have a first trial that is what we call phase 1/2, and 2 is because you are in patients and you are like looking to the dose as well, exploring the benefits, and then to go to a second trial that would be like a phase 2/3, as we call. That's the most common pathway. It's not always the one that's used, not necessarily the one we're going to use, but that's normally sufficient with a given number of patients that the FDA determines is what we call a safety database. That would allow, together with exploring the dose, defining the dose, making sure it's safe, make sure it works the way we expect, and then getting the feedback from the FDA on how many patients need to be exposed for how long for this drug to be approved. That would be a package that is generally acceptable to move forwards. So a couple years to get to that point, but we should be on the thick of the clinical developments in the next 18 months, I would say. There. Now, seizure is a key endpoint here. It's not the only thing we're going to be measuring, but it's a key endpoint. It's very likely going to be the primary endpoints for the efficacy portion of those trials. So we're going to need to have measurable seizures on that. And I think that that's as far as we can talk about kind of the inclusions. There are normally restrictions on the age of the first patients we treat. It's unusual to start with younger than 2. It's obviously something we're going to discuss with the FDA as well, but it's the most common is to be 2 and older at the time you start. I know it's very frustrating because we all want to treat as fast as possible, as soon as possible, but that's normally the constraints that exist. It's for the safety of the patients. It's all done with the right thoughts in mind by the regulators. So that's kind of the generalities. And Michael, I don't know if you want to jump in and give a little bit more details if I missed something.
Sure. Thanks, Marcio. Yeah, the one thing I just wanted to expand on was a point you made that I think is really important about while the primary endpoint, so what we'll be targeting will be seizures and change in seizures, we absolutely understand and respect and believe in the fact that there are many other symptoms and issues going on with your children and your family. So things like sleep, either too much sleep or not being able to stay asleep, etc. Different behaviors, irritability, all of these things. And we really value and want to take advantage of the fact that we'll have studies running to learn more about those particular symptoms. And so absolutely, as Marcio said, those types of things will be evaluated also. It certainly won't be just seizures. And then kind of along with that, another, I think, important piece that kind of correlates or goes along with the seizures is use of other medications and also use of the healthcare system. So, we will be looking at things like, how often do you have to use Diastat or intranasal midazolam or some other rescue med? How often do you have to go to the emergency room for seizures? Things like this that are important, hopefully, to you all as well as to just the broader healthcare community. So that's really the main pieces I wanted to add there.
I think this is all such important information for them. and I just want to pause and make sure that we hit all of these pieces. So the idea of there being other endpoints, I think, is something that's really important for families. And I want to also just highlight for the families that Praxis has historically been incredibly receptive and eager to talk about the things that are important in our community. And I just want to highlight that and say thank you. But that seizures are the easiest thing to measure, right? And there's good history there, and we know how to do a trial that looks like that. Marcio, do you have a sense of how many would be enrolled in that first phase of the trial next year? How many we would need?
So Michael is probably closer to that. He's been thinking about that 24/7, so I'll let him tackle it.
Yeah. So it would likely be in the realm of, a couple dozen patients, maybe 30, 40. And so that is, I do caveat that by saying that one of the kind of ideas that we're evaluating is, how could we evaluate this particular drug in, for example, 8A and 2A. And so is there a way to design a study that is, allows us to do that? So part of the total number, if you will kind of depend on the final design. And the other caveat I'll mention is that, at this phase, while it would be great to, get to everyone, sometimes having a smaller number is actually beneficial because you can, evaluate the drug in a smaller number of patients more quickly and really keep moving that much more quickly through the whole development process. So certainly, if you Google or look on clinicaltrials.gov, you'll often see, studies, particularly in Dravet or LGS with like hundreds of patients. That's definitely not this first study.
Yeah, we don't have that many patients to work with also. And so, it's, an added challenge. And I think also part of why this, and again, for the families, you guys are a part of the 8A community. You see how we do things, but Praxis works with lots of communities, and they have, all independently work with other communities in other roles. And I think part of what's really extraordinary about trying to design a program for such a small community is this back and forth, this very close connection, working together, talking together, making sure that they're designing something that we can help them carry out. And likewise, we're sharing our concerns and needs. So, and would your goal be also to begin with a 2 and up out of the gate? Okay, great. And so we've, I guess, switching gears just a little bit away from Prax 562, we did have a question on the heels of your very exciting announcement about your expanding ASO plans and programs at Praxis, which is wonderful. Families are, of course, eager to know whether you have an ASO for SCN8A.
It's not an unreasonable question, for sure. So I'm going to say categorically, we do not right now. We haven't disclosed what the other two are for, but unfortunately, at this moment, it's not for SCN8A. It is something that we continuously look into. For us, the way we look into ASOs and the reason why we have both ASOs and small molecules, right? It's a little bit different as well from a company perspective. I don't think anyone else has these two modalities towards DE in the same company. Is small molecules are good for some things, ASOs are good for other things. So depending on the disease, depending on the mix of mutations, depending on the distribution in the brain that is necessary, we believe we can meaningfully impact SCN8A with small molecules, but we continue to learn. And I think Kelly's going to talk a little bit about that on why we're doing this initiative with Citizen that you guys are also amazing on participating. That's the kind of learning that help us focus the programs. we have more research in ASOs and would love to hear your views about that as well and what we can bring to the table to advance. But at this given moment, we do not have a program for 8A.
And I think there's something, although obviously we would love to know that something, an ASO for 8A was in your pocket. In some ways, it's also nice to know that this is where our focus is, right? This is, as a community, this is where we're moving toward, that we aren't, there isn't something that's so close at hand that it makes sense to focus on that as opposed to looking toward the small molecule answers that we have that are very close at hand and that are very exciting. And since Marcio mentioned the citizen campaign, I think maybe it makes sense, Kelly, to have you talk a little bit about that campaign and why Praxis undertook it and what it means that we supplied the information that we were able to supply through that campaign.
Sure. So we started talking with Citizen about over a year ago and learning all we could about similar companies. And to be quite honest, I was a little bit skeptical because in a lot of their presentations and a lot of our conversations, they were using other diseases. They had really buttoned up presentation. And about that same time, I was trying to get all of my son's medical records for natural history study. I mean, he had been seen at a dozen institutions, thousands of pages of medical records. And it was very difficult to get everything I needed, including raw EEG files to study this study. And so we had the idea at Praxis, let's enroll my son into Citizen and see what they're able to extract. Because I didn't see how in the medical records we could answer all the questions we needed to and track development. I was just very skeptical. And so they did a presentation and completely blown away at the level of detail that were in his records, and they were able to extract all the different comorbidities when he was able to hold up his head, when he was able to sit unassisted, when he was able to start walking, holding a hand, the different medications he was on, combined with at that time his seizure frequencies and when it increased or decreased. So I'm very excited about it. And then it's very important, I think, for the caregiver, right? Because Citizen goes out, collects all of the medical records, and then now the caregiver, the parent, has this digitized portal that they have the ability to share with anyone they choose, any specialist, any researcher. And then Praxis gets the extracted information that we need about comorbidities, medication response, seizure frequency, does it change? All the information we need, in addition to anyone else out there with an IRB approved study can also access the extracted data. So it's really open access. It's a win-win for everybody involved. So also want to applaud the community. We started with SCN8A. We sponsored a cohort of 50 patients. We have still yet, a couple months later, been able to fill the 50 spots in that cohort. SCN8A community, the day that the Citizen Initiative was launched, you had 50 spots filled in the first day. And so such an exciting and engaged community to work with, to be able to partner together on this is really, really exciting. And so since we've sponsored another cohort for 8A, and you've also filled that, so I think we're 104 patients enrolled in a record amount.
Yeah, we should give her a round of applause.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing.
Well, I always say this community never ceases to amaze me for their willingness to engage when they know the purpose and understand, what they're working on. And I think again, for the families, this is just how we roll. This is what we know inside our community, but outside of our community, there are people coming to me and asking, how did you do this? And I just say, well, it's this amazing community, and that's how we do it. But it also really bodes well for instance, our ability to enroll in clinical trials and do what we need to do to help support drug development, especially with what will essentially be two, we hope, looking like two essentially simultaneous trials. And to that end, I think I'm going to ask a couple of more questions about your trial. I think we had a question in the chat here about whether individuals will need to come off of sodium channel blockers for your trial. Is that something that you know at this point and can speak to?
I was just typing for Tammy, so I guess I'm gonna not type, and then Michael and I can talk a little bit too for everyone about that. So Michael, you want to start?
Sure. Thanks. So the design has not been finalized, but I do, the things that I can, put out there are that we absolutely understand that there will be patients on other sodium channel blocking drugs. Most of the anti-seizure medicines are in that class, and so it's a given. And so we want to be able to design a study with reality in mind, and also to be able to assess in a safe, controlled way what that looks like. Now, with that being said, if someone happens to be on 4 anti-seizure meds and 3 of them touch the sodium channel, that might not end up being the way the study is designed initially, but this is definitely something that we're taking into consideration and building the study protocol to make sure we understand all of this. So it's that was a long way to say being on a sodium channel drug is not automatically excluding anyone at the moment.
Okay, that's very helpful to know, and I think as I think everybody on this group knows, one of my biggest concerns as an advocate is as we look toward the families making decisions that are going to be, big decisions about where to enroll, when to enroll, who to enroll with, and again, if they even can. I think our hope is that for the sake of success across the board, that the most appropriate patients find their way to your trial. So I think, and I know that this is maybe a little bit of a hard line to walk, but looking at the drug that's being developed at Neurocrine versus your drug, are there things that you can say about patients that might be better suited to Prax 562 as parents are sort of thinking about these kinds of decisions?
So maybe to start there, right? So I'm cheering and praying every day that they are successful. I really hope that Xenon and Neurocrine are incredibly successful in their trial. Hopefully even make us irrelevant, and then we can go and help like other kids. The likely scenarios that we both going to be needed, and more options is a good thing for patients, and that's why we're so excited about having other in the fields. The drugs work fairly differently, and that's one of the reasons why I believe they're going to be useful for different kinds of patients. Right now, as Michael was saying, it's hard for us to predict patients that wouldn't benefit. And the reason why I'm saying this, I'm not trying to create false hope whatsoever, is in the models we tested, we've seen a very good response rates in the animals. I would say exquisite response rate, and you're going to see when we publish this data in scientific journals. So we haven't really been too clear on patients that wouldn't respond for this if they have appropriate mutations, of course. That's on the type of the mutation. The channel, I think, is very similar to the other drugs in development. The question here is how the development matters, right, Hillary? So I like what you just said. Getting the best possible patient for a trial means the fastest for everyone that can benefit together. So sometimes it's frustrating, as you want, as I would like as well, like my kids to be involved and get early access, but sometimes not having it is the fastest way to get the drug, right? A failed trial on a drug that works is the biggest delay someone can actually endure, and that's never gets erased from the records of that drug. So we want to make sure we get to definitive answers as fast as possible so we can benefit these patients. And that's where considerations like geography, sites, I know some of the questions in the chat has been physicians, who are you working with, and so on. These are all things that we care a lot because the level of commitments, right, from the patients, from the physicians, from the nursing staff, and everyone else, sometimes are as important or more important than the drug. And we discount that oftentimes when you're talking about drugs and silver bullets out there, and understanding the medications and being compliant to the medications and being compliant to the way it's being given. So all of this we really think about a lot, and we've been talking to several clinicians, and we're going to be diligent, so we can go slow to go fast. That's, I think, the way I'm. As the team would, I'm sure, confirm, I'm always pushing for us to do things faster, but it's only as much as we get to patients. So that's the counterbalance there. Like, we're going to go as fast as it allows us to get to patients. So that's the general principle.
Yeah, and I think that's really helpful because the inclusion and exclusion criteria, I think, families are always asking, because the first question is, can my child be in this trial? But I think it is really important as a community that does think big picture very well, that you explain why this is the case. We have to make sure that we're enrolling the right patients, that we're getting as good data as possible, working with the right clinicians, and that ultimately will serve the greater good. So for instance, a child like mine, Esme, would never be able to be in this trial because she has complexity. But once the drug makes it to market, perhaps it would be something that would help her. But I wouldn't want her in a trial because it would, potentially mess up the data. So I think that's it's important to understand that level of complexity. We're getting a lot of questions about Europe. Also, I think, are you planning, it sounds like you said in the chat, Marcio, first sites would be in the US, but you are thinking, yeah.
It's like you're getting, every time I start typing, you're getting ahead of myself, as you are, as you always are, Hillary. So I give up. No, just kidding. So it's all, and I know, again, it's not that fulfilling to say we're still deciding on this, but the path in the United States is very straightforward, right? It's a little bit convoluted at the beginning, but then it's very efficient. And that's why we always say the US is one of the key targets. We also have more relationships here. We have a bias. We are in the US. Some countries in Europe are incredibly efficient, like the UK, for example, for phase 1s. The Netherlands is the same. Others, not so much. So we're looking into, like, what is the most efficient way to go through this phase to get to a later phase. And that might involve geographies outside of the US. That's something Michael and the team is doing, like, quite a lot of diligent work right now. So that's why I cannot give a definitive answer right now. The focus is quality of those sites, quality of the investigators, availability of patients, and a fast, what we call, regulatory pathway. In this phase, is not an approval, it's just how fast we can get the trial up and running in an efficient way. So, as I kind of said, the FDA has a good framework, MHRA has a very good framework in the UK, and we might be exploring those or others. The long-term commitments, that for us is a couple of years, not a couple of months, is to be a more global exploration in nature. So that's going to include as many geographies as can come on board at that point in time. When we forward, like, to approval and availability of the drug, right, then it's fairly different, because the regulatory pathways are completely different in Europe and in the United States and in China, in Latin America, everywhere really in the world. So that is going to be, we're going to try to go as much in parallel as possible for those geographies. But I would say, fortunately and unfortunately, the US is still more efficient than any other place, and a little bit more deliberate. Europe, just in general, takes a little bit longer, and we are engaging, we're, like, planning for that. But and then at the end, if a drug is approved in the US today and it's available tomorrow, we have a terrible healthcare system. I'm not saying it's very good, but it's generally we can get the drug. It's not the case outside of the US. They're normally 1 to 2 years on top of that for drugs to be available, the earliest, I would say. So all those considerations, we're thinking now. So when you get to that point, we can get on the hands of patients, because that's all that matters, right? Drugs getting approved that never got used are of no goods. So we'll continuously think about that.
And never be shy in this community about saying that you don't know or that it's more complicated, because I think that this is a community that responds well to, we'd rather hear something. We'd rather hear we're working on it, we're thinking about it, it's complicated, than to hear nothing at all until there's a precise answer. So I appreciate your willingness to sort of share the thought pattern. And to that end, I think, it's important. We're obviously an engaged community. We want to do what we can do to help you do what you need to do better. And as you know, we engaged with FDA at the end of last year with some, good outcomes, and the community answered a call to share their stories. Could you talk us through? I think probably Deborah, this is maybe your chance to chime in. What we can be doing as a community, how we can coordinate, how we can offer you our help and our support.
Well, that's a great question, and I really appreciate you asking it. Before I mention anything about the future, I want to actually recognize all that has been done so far, because whether it was last year with the FDA, or the ongoing conversations that we have with Hillary, or with individual parents throughout the world whose children are living with an SCN8A mutation, we're learning so much from you. And we really recognize that we are a little bit newer in this community, and that the community has already done a lot. So we're kind of stepping in to be a good partner later than the work has already begun. So I just want to acknowledge that. But there are so many ways that we can continue to work together and build on the amazing progress that's already been made. One of those ways is, Hillary, through this series, as you get informed about what's being done, asking those important questions about what's important to you. Is it geography? Is it participation? Is it better understanding of the inclusion-exclusion criteria? As you share what's important to you, we find ways where there's intersectionality in the work that we're doing, and collaboration opportunities. So like, as we're designing the trial, as we're asking those important questions, we're taking into consideration what's important to you, where there may be barriers for participation, or where we may be mismeasuring or looking at something that isn't necessarily as critical as we may have thought it is. So the surveys that Hillary sends out that you answer, incredibly important around formulation, so incredibly important. As we think about other opportunities, the point that was made earlier around when to have children under the age of 2 in a study, is that something where the FDA, in their consideration of safety and efficacy, fully understands unmet burden or unmet need and the burden of disease? Is this happening, or would it be better to study in younger children? Is this something that families in a patient listening session with the FDA may be able to explain the lived experiences, so that FDA understands when it's evaluating new medications or new potential medications, that this is something to consider, and meeting that burden by understanding where there's opportunity to change the evaluation process. So there are so many ways, and what we'll continue, and what our promise is to you, is to continue to have these conversations like we're having today, so that when we learn, we'll share. When there are opportunities for us to ask questions, you're there. That this is not one and done, but it's the beginning of many ongoing conversations with you, so that we can continue to learn together, not only in sharing what we know, but you sharing what you know, and then moving in lockstep, so that we make progress as a community. And Praxis definitely wants to be part of that progress and to be part of the community.
Thank you, Deborah. And I think everyone should know that, at this point, Deborah and I are meeting weekly. I'm talking to her about all sorts of things that are, going on in the community in a lot of detail. And just, I think a big part of why and how these relationships work are founded in trust and learning to understand how people communicate, what their skill sets are, what you can ask for. And before Deborah and I met weekly, Marcio and I met weekly. And before Marcio was CEO, I hung out with Kieran a bunch. And those are the foundations of making sure that these lines of communication are open. And when something is important to our community, I think everybody on this call knows that if something is important to our community, I will not stop until someone hears it. And I will keep bugging all of these people. Not that I have to bug them all that hard, but I think that this is part of how we're able to get so much done as a community. And as Karen is just saying, expressing her appreciation for you being so open with this community. We really absolutely appreciate that. And I think we're here to help you with this lift in any way that we can. And Deborah also plugged that feeding and formulation survey. This is a perfect example of something that from a series of conversations has come up, concerns around formulation and what that looks like for our community and how a drug actually gets into a kid, whether they're eating orally or they're using some kind of a feeding tube. We all know kids who eat orally can be pretty hard to dose with medications, and feeding tubes get clogged like crazy. So we've given a ton of feedback to Praxis, and then they helped us develop questions for a survey that we will be rolling out in probably 2 or 3 weeks. And so please, when that goes around, everyone respond, and those answers will be shared with Praxis, as well as our other partners, to help them do as good of a job as possible to serve the community. So I know we're nearing the end of our time. I want to give each of you a chance to add anything that you might like to add to the discussion. I'm sure we haven't covered nearly everything that we could cover, but I don't know if Marcio, do you have any closing thoughts?
Maybe I'll address one of the questions from that we got written, and then some closing thoughts. So maybe to clarify our hypothesis about 562, right? While originally we were targeting the persistent currents, and we thought that would be basically like some mutations that leads to dysfunction in persistent currents in the sodium channel, we could address with this molecule. I think what we learned along the way, and the beauty of science as well, is by targeting persistent currents, we create a modulatory events or a regulatory events in the action potential. And it does not necessarily restrict to disease or mutations that have a dysfunctional persistent currents, but rather, I would say, a different thresholds on the firing, a different way that the firing happens. That one of the ways, and Michael, jump in here if you have a better way to say than what I'm saying. So what we are seeing now in different disease, in different mutations, is it's not a necessary condition to have a dysfunction on that, a persistent current, but by regulating that, we're getting to a better state of firing or action potential, like propagation in general in the brain, which is incredibly encouraging for us, because it means it's way wider the potential impact it's going to have in patients than we originally thought. Now it's a hypothesis. It's so far panning out to be what we expected, but we still need to go and test to the end. But that's just to clarify, since there was a couple of questions about specific mutations and domains, and I think our thoughts is a little bit broader than that right now.
And actually, can I ask you to clarify, because I think there was a question earlier about because you are working across multiple sodium channels with this drug, what would make it different from a more broad spectrum sodium channel blocker that's not working on the persistent current? Yeah,
so we are optimized for 1.6. So we have a very high potency in 1.6, but we are pan isoform, right? So it's like several isoforms off the channel. Not all of them, and definitely not all of them equally. The biggest difference here is that we expect, and that we are seeing so far, is the way it blocks, right? What happens with most of the regular sodium channel blockers is you give a very small amount, nothing happens. You give a little bit more, you block the central pore of the channel, and then it basically sees like conductance through the channel, right? So action potential dies at that point in time, and you get from nothing to that point very quickly. And that's what we call therapeutic index, right? It's like from nothing happens to SAEs or side effects or things that are not tolerated. You don't have a lot of margin, and I think that's what we see in some of these kids. They are responding, they need a little bit more, and now we tripped it over, and you can't go there, unfortunately. What we are seeing so far is this ability to slowly regulate, and that we can get to the therapeutic level, at least that's our hypothesis, without getting to the toxic levels. Now, eventually, if you overdose to our expectation, you will block all currents, not only persistence in the channel. But it's to many folds what exists right now with the current treatment. So that's why we're so excited. So it's one could argue a better way. The jury's out on that better way, but I would say it's a very different way to modulate the currents on the sodium channel.
Thank you for explaining that. I think that's really helpful for our families, and sure. I think hearing it over and over again is also really important. So I'm happy we'll be having more of these conversations going forward. I want to be careful about everyone's time, so we should probably draw this to a close. But I don't know, Marcio, did you have anything you wanted to say in closing?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much. Like Hillary, as we talk all the time, right? Like this community is such a source of inspiration for everything we do. We talk about that all the time internally. I think we are self-motivated group, and we want to do what is right for these patients, but it definitely does not hurt when we get so much energy coming out of a community. And please keep pushing us, keep challenging us to do better. We love the challenge, and we're hopefully going to be very happy in the future together by helping all these patients.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys are really such a pleasure to work with, and have been all along. And I think we've really had a long time open and collaborative relationship, and I'm super appreciative of that, and look forward to continuing it in the future. So to close, I guess, close today and close the series, unbelievably, I want to just say, we will have more opportunities to come together as a community, both with Praxis as well as on our own to have more discussions later in the year. And again, just want to underscore for everyone that this is a relationship with Praxis that is, you're seeing it on display here, but this is something that's happening weekly, sharing information, and constantly trying to sort out ways to do more and better for this community. And it's also a relationship in which our community has shown repeatedly what kinds of heavy lifts we are capable of. And I think Praxis is clear that they understand this and will keep coming to us to help them. To that end, again, don't forget that feeding and formulation survey that will be circulating. We need your input, and it will be quick, I promise. That's our goal, to keep these things as short as possible. So thank you all guests today for showing up and opening yourselves up to us and sharing what you know, and taking the time to meaningfully engage around the work that you're doing on behalf of and alongside our community. Thank you to Casey for hosting, to Megan and Shelley for tech support, and as always, the most important people, thank you to our community members for coming to this space with your questions, your ideas, your insights, your requests. This is how we get the work done for our community. So I will see you all again soon, I hope, but I'm going to enjoy a little bit of a break from the Meaningful Change series now. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you, guys.
Well, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.